You know that feeling, right? Trying to keep up with complex stuff, research papers especially.
It's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes.
Oh, definitely. They can be dense.
Well, that's why we're here. We've gone deep into this really interesting new paper, Learning to Reason Under Off-Policy Guidance.
Yep. And we're going to unpack it for you.
Our mission today is really to get grips with this framework they call LUFFY.
LUFFY stands for Learning to Reason Under Off-F Policy Guidance. It's all about improving how these big AI models, large language models or LRMs, actually reason.
Okay, so what's the big problem LUFFY is trying to solve? The paper talks about reinforcement learning being key.
Right, that's been a big driver for improving reasoning. But
Mhm.
a lot of the current methods, they're on policy.
On policy, meaning the model mostly learns just from its own attempts, like looking only at its own homework.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It learns from its own successes and failures, which is good, but the paper argues it can be limiting.
Limiting how? Like, it can't think outside its own box. Exactly. It struggles to develop truly new ways of reasoning beyond refining what it could kind of already do. It can get stuck.
Okay, so LUFFY is trying to get it unstuck. How?
Well, LUFFY's core idea is to help these models learn reasoning that goes beyond their current abilities, but without just, memorizing answers.
Right, not just rote learning.
It does this by bringing in outside help, high-quality examples of reasoning from elsewhere. We think there are some real aha moments in how it pulls this off.
Looking forward to those. So the paper starts by talking about a recent aha moment the field already had, right? With reinforcement learning.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, actually. We've seen models get much better at reasoning, sometimes just by rewarding them for getting the right answer. Simple rules leading to complex behavior.
Like DeepSeek R1, generating those really long chains of thought.
Precisely. That model, and others showing sophisticated reasoning, even self-reflection, largely driven by this simple reward signal.
And this connects to 0RL.
Uh-huh. 0RL is basically applying this reinforcement learning directly to the base model, using its own outputs to learn, letting it bootstrap itself, in a way.
But we're back to that on-policy limitation again.
We are. The paper argues this is why models might hit a ceiling. They're only learning from themselves.
Even powerful ones, like they mentioned Llama 3.2 hitting plateaus.
That's the concern raised, yeah. It suggests that just refining based on your own output might only get you so far. How do you learn something genuinely new?
Okay, so if learning from yourself has limits, what else is there?
Well, the obvious next step seems to be
Didn't
imitation. Right.
Just show the model how a better model does it.
Exactly. Fine-tuning the model on reasoning traces the step-by-step thinking from a more powerful LRM, like, say, using DeepSeek R1's successful reasoning attempts as lessons.
Seems logical.
Yeah.
Learn from the best.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's a catch.
There often is. The paper points to research raising concerns. Pure imitation. It can lead to models that are good mimics, but maybe a bit superficial.
Superficial. How so?
They might learn the style of reasoning very well, but struggle when the problem changes slightly. They become rigid, as the paper puts it. They don't generalize well, and it might even hinder learning later on.
Okay, so it's like learning the moves, but not the underlying strategy.
That's a good way to put it. And that's the gap LUFFY is designed to address. It's not just RL, not just imitation. It's a blend.
A blend. Okay, tell me more. It uses off-policy traces.
Right. Off-policy just means data coming from outside the model's own direct experience. In this case, reasoning examples from a different, maybe better model.
So LUFFY looks at those in its own attempts.
Yes. It integrates these off-policy demonstrations with its own on-policy rollouts during training. Figure 1 in the paper gives a nice visual of this.
So it's dynamically balancing imitation and exploration.
You got it. Intuitively, if the model messes up, it can lean more on the expert example for guidance.
Yeah.
And if the model is actually doing well, generating good reasoning steps itself, it keeps doing that, keeps exploring its own way.
Okay, that sounds smart. It learns when needed, but doesn't just become a copycat.
That's the goal.
But isn't there a risk? If you feed it all these perfect expert examples, won't it just latch onto those and stop trying new things itself? The paper mentioned entropy collapse.
That's a really key challenge, yeah. Just naively mixing in off-policy data can make the model converge too quickly on mimicking those examples and lose its exploratory drive. Less entropy, less randomness, less exploration.
So how does LUFY stop that?
It uses a clever technique. The paper calls it policy shaping via regularized importance sampling.
Okay, sounds technical. What's the gist?
The core idea is to be smarter about how it learns from that off-policy data. It essentially gives more importance, more learning weight, to actions in the expert data that the model itself was unlikely to have taken.
Oh, so it pays extra attention when the expert does something surprising or counterintuitive to the model.
Precisely. It's like saying, whoa, you wouldn't normally do this, but the expert did, and it worked. Let's really learn from that specific step.
That makes sense. It encourages exploring those less obvious paths, leading to deeper learning, not just surface patterns.
Exactly. Figure 3 shows this shaping function. It literally reshapes the learning gradient to boost those low probability but high value actions.
And they even give the function fx equals xx plus sug with gamma as 0.1. It's amazing how a mathematical tweak guides the learning.
It really is. Now, another interesting thing LUFFY does is it removes something called the on-policy clip. This is usually part of algorithms like PPO. Why take it out?
Right, clipping usually helps keep training stable, stops the model changing too drastically based on one update. So removing it seems risky.
It does seem counterintuitive at first, but think about it. You're bringing in this off-policy guidance, especially early on, which might be very different from what the model currently does.
Ah, okay. And the clip would prevent the model from fully absorbing that very different but potentially very useful information.
That's the argument. The clip, designed for stability with on-policy updates, can actually hinder learning when the guidance signal is significantly different, which it often is with off-policy data. Figure 4 shows clipping happens more often with LUFFY when the clip is left in.
So removing the clip gives the model the freedom, the flexibility to actually make those bigger jumps needed to learn from the expert examples.
Exactly. It allows it to embrace those unfamiliar but effective actions more readily.
Okay, wow. So LUFFY combines expert guidance, lets the model explore, uses policy shaping to focus learning on key differences, and removes the clip for flexibility. Sounds like a really well thought out system. What results did they get?
Yeah, the results are pretty striking. Across 6 quite tough math benchmarks, things like AIM, Math 500, even Olympiad bench.
Okay, serious stuff.
Yeah.
Ugh.
LUFFY showed an average gain of over 7 percentage points compared to the existing 0RL methods. That's a big jump. You can see it in Figure 2 and Table 1.
Over 7 points average. Wow, that's substantial.
Right.
But does it just get better at those tests, or does it actually generalize? Can it handle new stuff?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And here, LUFFY seems to really shine. Table 2 shows it had, on average, a 6.2-point advantage on what they call out-of-distribution tasks.
Out of distribution, like problems quite different from the training data.
Right. Things like ARCC, GPQA, Diamond, MMLU Pro testing, broader reasoning, scientific knowledge, stuff like that.
So it's not just memorizing math solution patterns.
It appears not. It suggests LUFFY is developing more fundamental adaptable reasoning skills compared to, say, just doing supervised fine-tuning SFT on expert examples. SFT can sometimes overfit to the training style.
Which goes back to that superficial and rigid issue with pure imitation we talked about.
Exactly. LUFFY seems to learn from the expert data effectively, but maintains enough exploratory drive to generalize better.
So it imitates well, but doesn't lose itself. That's the key takeaway on performance.
I think so. Better performance on benchmarks and, crucially, better generalization to new problems.
Did they look at how it learns over time? The dynamics?
They did. Figure 5 is interesting. It shows that, yeah, early on, LUFFY relies more heavily on imitating the off-policy guidance.
Makes sense. It's learning the ropes.
But as training goes on, it starts exploring more on its own, becoming more independent, while holding on to the benefits it got from that guidance.
Like using the expert demos as a launch pad.
Sort of, yeah. And that same figure shows its entropy. Remember, think exploration or randomness stays higher throughout training compared to standard on-policy RL.
So it keeps exploring, keeps looking for potentially better ways, even late into training.
That's the idea. Higher entropy suggests it's less likely to get stuck in a rut. The paper mentions these entropy fluctuations might even correspond to the model exploring pivotal tokens.
Pivotal tokens, like crucial, less obvious steps.
Yeah. Those moments in reasoning that might not be the most probable step, but unlock the whole solution. LUFFY's continued exploration might help it find more of those.
They also did an ablation study, right? Taking LUFFY apart piece by piece.
Always good to see. Yes, Table 3 and Figure 6. They tested versions without the policy shaping or without removing the clip.
Yeah.
The results confirm that both policy shaping and removing the clip are important contributors, especially when you're using that off-policy guidance. They work together synergistically. It's not just one trick.
That strengthens the case for the whole framework. Did they try it on different kinds of models?
They did, showed its versatility. Table 4 shows they applied LUFFY to smaller models, like a 1.5 billion parameter math model, and also to models that had already been fine-tuned instructionally.
And it still helped.
Yep, delivered significant gains there too. Suggests LUFFY isn't just for massive base models, it's a more broadly applicable technique.
And finally, they compared LUFFY head-to-head against SFT and standard on-policy RL on things other than just accuracy.
Right, a deeper analysis. They looked at how similar the reasoning steps were to the expert, using BLEU scores, how long the generated solutions were.
Oh, interesting. What did they find there?
Well, Figure 7 suggests LUFFY often finds shorter correct solutions than SFT, which might mean more efficient reasoning. Less verbose, perhaps.
Now direct?
Possibly. And Figure 8 showed LUFFY tended to exhibit more exploration during testing, not just training.
So even when solving problems for real, it's still considering more diverse paths.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. All these pieces of analysis point towards LUFFY fostering a more effective, flexible, and efficient reasoning process compared to just imitation or just on-policy RL alone.
It really achieves that balance, doesn't it? Learning from the expert without just rigidly copying, keeping that vital exploration alive.
That really seems to be the core achievement. It avoids the pitfalls of pure imitation while getting benefits beyond pure self-exploration. It might even allow models to eventually surpass the original expert data by combining insights with novel exploration.
So wrapping this up for everyone listening, UFFY presents a really compelling path forward for making these AI models better reasoners, more capable, more adaptable.
Yeah, the key is that intelligent blend, leveraging external expertise without killing the model's own creative exploratory potential.
It gets that dynamic equilibrium, right? Learning from the best, but still finding its own way.
Exactly.
Which makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Could this core idea, this careful balancing act between guidance and exploration work for other things, beyond math problems?
That's the big question, I think. Could we apply this to teaching AI complex planning or scientific discovery, creative writing even?
What are the implications for how we train AI to adapt in general in messy, unpredictable environments?
It definitely opens up some fascinating possibilities. Future work could explore LUFFY in totally new domains, or maybe even refine that balance further. How much guidance is optimal? When should the model rely on it versus exploring? Lots to think about.
A really stimulating area.
Yeah.
It feels like finding that sweet spot between learning from others and learning by doing is key. Not just for AI, but maybe for learning in general, something to definitely mull over.